What is up, everybody? Mark on the mic here, joined by Garrett Prahl, DIY Sportsman. Now, Garrett, you've got one heck of a platform that you've built, and we're not talking tree stand platforms or saddle platforms. We're talking YouTube platforms, other things. The topic today is going to be maybe even hunting from those platforms, or at least the physical ones, but the topic is gun hunt like a bow hunter. I think oftentimes, people maybe they might just bow hunt. They might just gun hunt. A lot of folks do both, like you, Garrett, and then actually me as well. And because of the effective range of a firearm, I think oftentimes people think, well, I need to be able to shoot far. And I don't think that's necessarily always the case. It can give you an advantage, but you might want to start thinking like a bow hunter. But before we get too deep into the topic, Garrett, since this is your first time joining us, and I'm going to quit talking this and end this lengthy intro, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about DIY Sportsman, and give us a little background of how you got here today.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, for having me on. I grew up in Wisconsin, hunting since I was 12, and then I moved to Minneapolis area right now, so I do a lot of my hunting just kind of in the upper Midwest, North Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin. I've gone out to Iowa a couple times, travel trips to Missouri, Nebraska, but ultimately I do a lot of my hunting just locally from as early as I can possibly do it in early September until usually as late as I can possibly do it into December and even January. And have been making YouTube videos that started out mostly as kind of how-tos about mobile hunting, setting up tree stands, how to use tools to more effectively scout and that sort of thing. And have started doing, filmed hunts and have kind of grown it from there.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, we were pre-casting, as we often do around here. It sounds like you've been doing some trad bow hunting. So it's like trad bow, compound, rifle hunting. You kind of do it all, huh?
Yeah, I enjoy them all for, different, similar reasons, but also, different reasons as well.
Very cool.
Usually by the time I get to rifle season, I'm ready to just, have a little bit different experience after grinding for so many months with the bow.
Oh, I know. I mean, I've said it before on the podcast, but sometimes I swear the only reason that I bow hunt is so I can get back at him with the rifle at the end of the season. So, well, cool, man. Well, let's talk about this. Like I said, the topic, gun hunt like a bow hunter. What are some things that people who are going to go out gun hunting, might want to be thinking about when they hit the woods?
I think one of the big ones, and again, assuming we're talking generally about land that's going to get pressured, whether it's, the local family land where you got a whole bunch of people on, maybe they're not all on the same page doing their own thing, or maybe it's public land, trying to think about where those deer are going to end up once the pressure hits. And in a lot of times, those places aren't going to be the areas where we might be able to leverage the long range capabilities of a shotgun or a rifle. And I've had a lot more success setting up in areas where maybe my best shot opportunity is 40, 60, maybe even 70 yards. And it might be even a tight pinch point between, two bedding areas where my longest shot might be 30 yards. It might actually be very similar to a rut style pinch point type of setup. The only difference is you're handling a rifle instead of a bow.
Now, when you're setting up on that pinch, is that essentially going to be just I guess an area that provides cover so that deer feels secure, but it's almost more of an escape route when they're maybe going to go back into some thicker stuff or to a bedding area then? Or what do you think is happening when you're in that spot?
It's usually always going to be some type of relationship really close to whatever the deepest cover you're going to have on that area. And it's kind of always this you're playing this game where you're looking at the land size too, because I've gone into a lot of places that were maybe smaller and I go sit on the edge of that cover and then a bunch of guys come in with their flashlights an hour before first light and you can hear the deer running past you and they're in the heaviest, thickest cover before it even cracks first light. But if you have a bigger piece of land, I've had deer just filter in throughout the day and you got guys in, the big wood lot 3/4 of a mile away and you're sitting out over, a swamp or something. And maybe you would think if you're high enough up, you can shoot down into it. But the reality is a lot of times, even in those scenarios, you might have alder brush or whatever else that's effectively limiting your range to say 50, 60 yards. And you might have deer filter through you, 10 a.m., noon, 3 in the afternoon, like pretty much all day. And that's maybe a little bit of a departure from how I would strictly try to set up from like a bow hunting perspective, but it's similar in just the thought process about being where you need to be.
Yeah. What about on maybe even an unpressured property? I know a lot of us don't have the luxury of being on unpressured properties, but are there times when you would still set up in a spot where you don't have the luxury of being able to see that far?
Probably. I mean, it depends probably if it's what am I after? Am I after, the biggest buck that's on the property that I know of? Am I just trying to put meat in the freezer, shoot some does? If it's the latter, then I might be more likely to sit in an area where I can just let the deer filter out. Maybe I can get in and out really nice and easy and be able to leverage that. If you know that the neighbors are going to be doing a bunch of deer drives, that would affect it too. Maybe if I got that thick spot on the property where I'm just going to sit there and wait for the neighbors to push all the deer in.
Yeah, for sure. I know, like, sometimes I think of gun season, and it's hard to. For instance, I've hunted a couple pieces of private actually, where there's a mix of timber, some good pinch points, a little bit of marsh, and then there's like an open ag field in the kind of in the epicenter of it, right? And bow hunting at great property, would always see a lot of deer, some really nice bucks. And then the interesting thing was though, and I never gun hunted the property, but whenever the folks that gun hunted the property would gun hunt it, all the they had box blinds, so they'd go from these tree stands that are set up in these travel corridors where all the deer are moving through during the bow season, and they'd transition to box blinds to shoot over that big open field. And I always thought to myself, I'm like, why not go just to all those deer stands that you've been bow hunting out of, where you've been having close encounters with really nice bucks at 20, 30, 40 yards or whatever, but it was also really thick in there. And it's like, or you might have a deer that goes by, it's like, oh, it's 80 yards, 90 yards, 100 yards. But if you had that rifle, like, it's a done deal. It's just with the bow, it's a little bit more challenging, obviously, with the shorter effective range, I'd say, particularly in where it's a little bit harder to thread the needle in some of that brush. And so that's an example that, that I think about, where I'm like, man, like, you're just thinking about it, like rifle hunting, like you almost you have to set up where you can shoot that far. And I just don't think that's always the best spot,
Yeah. And even on a smaller scale, we get the same stuff when we're trying to pick tree stands for the rut, right? It's like, I want to be able to sit here so I can access, potentially 4 different trails, but maybe the right trail is this one over here and you can only shoot at that one. Same kind of mentality.
I am very much guilty of that one, actually. We're like, oh, I want to be able to shoot, both sides, where, you're putting yourself potentially in a little bit of a no man's land where you're not going to get the right opportunity. You might see him, or, a buck that you want to shoot, but not getting the right opportunity. Any other tips, for gun hunters out there that they might be able to learn from, bow hunters?
I think, one thing that I see from guys who are just strictly gun hunters, a lot of times the only time they spend in the woods might be the gun season itself. Maybe the weekend before, you'll see them out there, looking at spots, prepping tree stands for the next week or whatever. But if they would take the time to go out there and say like March, April, before you get green up, and kind of really take the time, take a full weekend and learn the land a little bit more, that can really help you refine and spend a lot more of your time allocation toward learning where you really need to be. And that's really going to help your positioning, I think, during the fall. If you find the right spot, a lot of times, even if there is a lot of pressure, those deer will act very naturally. They might not act like they're pressured if you're deep enough into the property and in a place where they're not expecting that pressure.
For sure. And another thing, and I'm really glad you brought that up, because that's definitely something that I see a lot here in Wisconsin. And some contrast, I'd say we're making, speaking in generalities here. This is definitely not everybody, right? But, for instance, my brother-in-law, man, he was out scouting and, spring and, trimming stands and doing that. Even then, went back in the summer, trimmed a little bit more stuff out, getting the stand set. Like, he's always doing all that pre-work, before archery season. So when he gets in, when bow season hits, he's ready to rock, right? In contrast, again, generalities, it's the day, 2 days before gun season, a day before gun season, guys are going in with 4-wheelers, hanging stands, putting, getting the ladder stand out of its box, and obviously some pretty intrusive activity that the deer are not used to, and then, going to go sit in that stand the very next day. And I think that's just a huge point that you made, is hey, do that pre-work, do that scouting on the front end, get those stands hung and set up, in advance. So all you have to do is sneak in quiet, get up, and hopefully let good things happen.
Yeah. I think the other thing that has helped me a little bit too, and this is not necessarily from where to set up perspective, but more of an execution standpoint, is it seems like, with archery, we're practicing all summer, right? For the most part. With rifle, I fall into this. I get out there whenever there's an open range day. I make sure that my gun's still dialed in at 100 and I go hit the woods. And for guys that are probably more used to opening or hunting more open ground, they might just be like, yeah, I'm going to have a nice solid shooting rest. Like, it's just something you think about. But when you're hunting in these tighter areas, I think there's the temptation a lot of times to just shoot offhand, which I do a lot of times. But I've also found that even if I capitalize on the shot, I might walk up to the animal and be like, oh, wow, I was off by 6 inches. It still killed the deer, but I need to either get better at my, offhand shooting technique, find a way to do that. Or I feel like when I have started hunting with a saddle more, I can actually use the trunk of the tree a lot of times as somewhat of a rest, or from hunting out of like a tamarack tree or something, I can use a limb for that extra shooting rest. And just the confidence that you get when squeezing the triggers, I feel like so much greater when I'm able to have that nice, steady crosshairs.
100%. I mean, you look at like bow hunting, it's like, what have you seen happen over time? Like, I used to see like, here's a little shorty stabilizer out front, and it's like, front stabilizers are, you see a lot of guys going longer. Now we're adding back bars. Some of those are getting longer. I think at some point you kind of, the practicality in hunting, I think there's a balancing act there, but what's that stabilizer doing? It's stabilizing the bow, essentially, providing not a rest, but you're stabilizing the bow, and that's exactly what getting a rest does. And I mean, you nailed it. If you can get a rest, and it might take not shooting right away. It's like, okay, wait, before I shoot, let me go 10 yards and creep up to that fence post, get a rest. Or instead of shooting offhand, man, do I have a backpack on? Can I sit down and, use my backpack as a rest? Do I need to invest in a set of shooting sticks, which I am a huge proponent of shooting sticks. And I've even carried shooting sticks into a tree stand before. So a lot of things you can do. Like you said, you can use the tree, use limbs on trees, but it might take you a couple more seconds, but it might also be the difference between a hit and a miss. It's funny. I mean, there's just so many things that I feel like, gun hunters can learn from bow hunters. Bow hunters can learn from gun hunters. There's definitely a lot of, crossover there. But, yeah, I do think the big one for me is like almost like hunting those bow style spots, if you will, but you just got the advantage of having that rifle in your hand.
Yeah. That's really the biggest thing, which obviously makes the shot execution a lot easier, generally speaking. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I always have to keep telling myself is, even if I'm in some of those tighter areas, if you got guys walking through, it's like, don't really care. Like, for all we know, the next guy that walks through might push a deer through, that tight little area that I have a good shot in, which is always tough, I think, mentally to overcome if there is a lot of pressure. But if you're back in the spots that make more sense from a nice tight quarters perspective and where the deer actually want to be, you're going to run into less people because people are not going to gravitate as much to that. And it seems like the people that do try and go into that stuff, because I think that's where the deer are, a lot of times I see them just walking through and they'll be busting deer out and not getting shot opportunities at them because the cover is too thick. And if you have the right vantage point, you're going to get those opportunities.
Yeah. And I'd say they're probably oftentimes not even seeing or knowing that deer was there. So, yeah, I think that's a big one too, is, using, it's funny, you go into the woods, you're like, I want to get away from it all and have, solitary experience, but that pressure isn't always a bad thing. And like you said, you can definitely capitalize on it.
Yeah. And some of those spots take, a couple of years to figure out. Guys come in from locations and places you didn't expect, but then the next year you got it figured out.
Is that something that you'll actively kind of like maybe on the aerials or things like that, be like, okay, here's an access point, here's an access point, here's an access point, I think the deer are likely going to, retreat into this area, and then you pinpoint that?
Yeah, I definitely do that. And then also the scouting in the off season and just the time you spend in the woods during that rifle season. I find a lot of times, especially in Wisconsin, you might have, let's say 70% of guys who are mostly staying in the hardwoods. And a lot of times they're just hunting, say like opening weekend. But then you'll get those few guys, let's say if there's some marsh on that particular piece of land, they might be out there with, sitting in a tamarack tree where they can see 200 yards and they'll sit there the whole entire season. Well, you might not know that guy's doing that the first year, but if you would have scouted it in the off season, you might have seen the screw in steps, still in the tree or something along those lines, or the limbs trimmed, or maybe the guy left out a scent wick or something, which with the rut timing and the firearms timing in Minnesota, you find a lot of scent wicks from gun hunters because the seasons coincide with the rut. So that can definitely help out the off season, and then seeing guys, actually in the season. Then you go back to the map, say, okay, now that I know where a lot of this pressure actually is and is coming from, what's getting missed, and then figure out a way to hunt that.
Gotcha. I like it, man. I like it. You're getting me pumped for gun season. Anything else we missed here? Anything else folks might want to be thinking about that off the top of your head?
I would say treat it, if there's more pressure, treat it more like bow hunting during the rut than bow hunting in like the early season or late season. Meaning try and stay out there all day if you can. Make sure you're dressed appropriately. Make sure you got snacks or whatever you need to stay out in the tree. Because so often those opportunities can come at any time of the day where you might not be expecting it. Versus maybe, muzzleloader season, it could be a different thing if you're not getting that much pressure.
For sure. And man, it's like all these great points. I mean, you'll see it a lot. I'm sure you see it. I know I've seen it too. Everybody presses in the morning, so deer, they're moving more in the morning naturally oftentimes, but then now you've got this pressure of people moving through, getting to where they want to sit or stand or, do a drive. They're moving deer then, 10, 11, it's cold, you're hungry, the house is calling or just getting warmed up as your truck. And if you're, in your truck for a little bit or whatever that is, people gravitate out. If you're not one of the people that leaves, they're going to move those deer again at that, 10, 11, 12 time frame, and you're going to get that midday buck. And then the same way for the evening. People go out for the evening hunt, and they're moving deer back through, and, essentially you're just capitalizing on a bunch of random mini deer drives all day.
Yeah, pretty much.
I like it. Well, awesome, man. I know I'm out of ideas unless you've got any more that you're just like, I mean, every time I ask a question, you come up with another good one. So maybe you got another good one up your sleeve. I don't know.
No, I think we covered most of the basics. And there's always a lot of specifics, but a lot of specifics are very property independent. So
For sure. Well, awesome, man. I appreciate you joining us today. Appreciate the tips. Lots of really, really solid advice there. If you haven't been, maybe you need to start gun hunting like a bow hunter. And if you haven't been checking out Garrett, where can they find you?
Best place is probably the DIY Sportsman YouTube channel or DIY_Sportsman on Instagram.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Check them out. Thanks, everybody. Until next time, good luck out there, and we'll catch you on the next one.